What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. And the Phillies coming off of a third straight victory. They take both games against the Toronto Blue Jays, a very good Toronto Blue Jays team that both Anthony and myself, before the season started, predicted to win the American League. So I know it wasn't the prettiest of wins on Wednesday, but they get it done. They've strung together a few good wins now, Anthony. And one of the things that we've harped on quite a bit throughout the first, whatever it's been now, 6-7 weeks of this season, has been the lack of starting pitching, the inconsistency of the starting pitching. And sometimes baseball is a simple game. And it's so simple in that the Phillies, for the last 3 games, have gotten 3 very good starts from, whether it be Taijuan Walker, whether it be Aaron Nola, whether it be Zach Wheeler. Those 3 guys, their last 3 times out now, all 3 of them quality starts. They're giving them some length. And here they are. They've strung together some wins now. So they have the Rockies playing good baseball heading into this weekend, but a nice stabilizing week for the Phillies here.
Yeah, it really was. It coming off of perhaps their worst week of the season, and that's saying something considering how they started the season 1-5, right? And so if you start the season 1-5 and have a worse week than that later on, man, that had to be a bad week. But you're right. Starting pitching, I mean, look, that's what it always comes down to, Bob, right? I mean, we always sit here, we could talk about the offense all we want, but really, if you want to be a successful team in baseball, it's going to come down to your pitching. And the Phillies starting staff has left a lot to be desired to this point in the season. Zach Wheeler on Wednesday afternoon threw the best start of the year for any pitcher. He was really, really good. Yeah, he gave up the solo home run that looked like it was going to doom the Phillies going into the 9th inning. But other than that, he was phenomenal. Really, the Blue Jays had no answers for him. Nola had an encouraging start the day before in the sense that he pitched well. He had a couple of innings where it could have gotten away from him, and we've seen it get away from him in starts this year, and he was able to pitch out of trouble. Plus, his velocity was up for the first time this year, which was a good thing. Taijuan Walker was the one that really impressed me, and that was Sunday against Boston. They really just kind of simplified what he was throwing. Guy can throw like 7 pitches. I mean, let's be honest. He's got like this crazy-ass arsenal. And he just basically went, you know what? We're going to go fastball splitter. That's pretty much what he did. I mean, fastball sinker splitter, right? I mean, his 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th pitches, he threw maybe 8 total combined between them all for the entirety of the game. It was a 2-pitch mix pretty much. And he dominated. That splitter was awesome against a Red Sox lineup that had been hitting everybody, including the Phillies, the 2 games prior. So those three starts should encourage. Again, it's 1 start per guy, right? So you got to say, okay, let's see them do it again a second time. We're going to see Walker tonight in Colorado. You're going to see Nola again Sunday against the Rockies. And then you got Wheeler on Monday against the Giants. But the more important thing is we get Ranger Suarez back into the rotation on Saturday as Bailey Falter's been pushed back. Probably a good thing there. And it's something to be excited about and look forward to, even though Colorado can tend to be a house of horrors for any pitching staff, especially the Phillies.
Yeah, so the Phillies come into this series against the Rockies at 18-19 now, a game under 500. And if they win the series, they will get through the first 40 games of the season at 500 if they take 2 out of 3. And given where they've started and given some of the inconsistencies that they've had, I would not be thrilled by that. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 20-20 after 40 games is something that this team needs to celebrate. But when you talk about where they were last Saturday night, where they were after 5 games this season, I think in fairness, you'd say, like, okay, like every time that they've stumbled, one of the things that we know about this team, one of the things that we saw last year was that when they started to stumble, and it looked like things were getting away from them, they would always find a way to do enough to find their footing and sort of stabilize. Mm-hmm. And to their credit, and though I will be very critical of the fact that they are stumbling at times, they have shown, again, an ability to sort of right the ship for stretches where they can sort of at least say, all right, like we haven't wrecked our season here. Like we haven't fallen 12 games behind the Braves. We haven't fallen 7 games under 500. Like they've always been able to kind of come back and stay at at that 500 mark, but it's time for this team to sort of get going and get over that hump now. Now, I got to tell you, I mean, you look at Colorado and we know that the Rockies aren't a particularly good team, but, I think two things give you a little bit of pause going into this series. One, the Phillies struggle in Colorado. The Rockies have, even in their last few seasons in which they've played pretty bad baseball, they've been formidable at home. But Colorado is also 8-2 in their last 10 games right now. So the Phillies are catching a bad team, or what I think is a bad team still, at maybe the wrong time. Or you could look at it and say perhaps Colorado is just sort of, they're due to fall off here.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've played good baseball, but we already saw this lineup, and we know it's not a good one, right? Even though the Phillies won 3 out of 4 against them when they were here, the first night was an embarrassment. They got shut out by the Rockies. Ryan Feltner shut them out of all people. They're going to see him again. I think he pitches Saturday's game. So that's the one game it was like, oh boy. My bigger concern is not necessarily the Rockies, but the Phillies. I think the lineup's a little inconsistent right now.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
I mean, you only got a couple of guys that are really kind of going, and you got a couple of guys who are kind of under the radar bad lately. I mean, nobody's really talking about the fact that Alec Boehm's not hitting, and nobody's talking about the fact that Bryson Stott's in a really bad slump, and Brandon Marsh is still getting on base, and he gets a hit here and there, and but he's also kind of tailed off a little bit from that incredibly hot start that he's had. And then we've talked about Schwarber and Turner a ton. Turner right now has the emptiest 10-game hitting streak I've ever seen. And so those guys aren't really there. So really you're getting production from, Harper's been Harper. Nick Castellanos continues to be the best offensive player on the team, and Real Muto's been okay. And that's pretty much it. Sosa's been okay out of the 9-hole. But really, you're not getting enough offense. And I think that this is, look, you're going into a ballpark and against a pitching staff that you should hit and where you should hit. This needs to be a weekend where the offense kind of comes alive to me. If they don't, even if they win the series, right? Even if they win this series and it's more won by their pitching staff and not by the lineup, I'm going to start to have a little bit of concern because you're 6 weeks in and you need a little bit more consistency from these guys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And listen, I was there did you cover the game on Wednesday?
Yes, I was there.
Okay, so
I was there. We got the reason nothing ended up on the site was because of the Flyers related stuff. They ended up hiring a president, so I ended up getting tied up with other things. But yes, I was there in the building.
I heard about that. So I took my father on Wednesday, and we big spender. We sat in the Diamond Club. We were actually in section D, 14 rows up. It's the best seats I've ever had to a baseball game, and that includes anything in a press box too.
Yeah.
And just watching Gausman and Wheeler go at it. I mean, both of them were awesome. It was maybe the weirdest walk-off win that I've ever been to. But one of the things that, jumps out at you is just, you're right. I mean, you look at this lineup, and I don't want to belabor some of the things that we talked about on Monday, but the guys that were carrying you early on, we always put the disclaimer on it, like, hey, it's only been a couple weeks here. You're not expecting Alec Boehm to hit 335 with a 900 OPS this season. And I don't expect Bryson Stott to win a National League batting title. But at the same time, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit disappointed in the two of them, especially. And, that game on Wednesday, I think that there were two at-bats specifically that kind of highlighted moments in which you sort of scratched your head a little bit. And, Bryson Stott comes up, and I guess it was was it the 8th inning, I want to say, or was it the 8th or the 9th?
It was the 9th when he needed to get the bunt down.
He doesn't get the bunt down, and you're kind of like, what are we doing here? And then you have Alec Boehm has a chance to win the game later in the 9th with the runner on third base and less than 2 outs. And that's really the at-bat I want to talk about. What he does is he ends up grounding out to first base. You get a 3-2 put out at the plate. And it was a disappointing sequence for me in that it's sort of representative of what we've seen a lot from him lately. He's gone back to being like this slap and punch hitter. And earlier in this season, even if the extra base hits weren't piling up, there was a lot of hard contact, a lot of line drive contact. And lately you're starting to see the ball on the ground a lot again. You're looking at a hitter that just seems like he's completely lost his confidence. And I wouldn't really care about that in a 2-week or 3-week sample size. But when you look at the larger body of work of Alec Boehm, the highs have been so high and the lows have been so low that there has to be at least a little bit of concern, like, oh boy, here we go again with another instance in which this guy has just completely lost it again. And you know, I'm not quite there yet, but I do think it's like worth considering. I mean, you look at his last 15 games, he's hitting 218 with a 562 OPS. But if you stretch that out to 20-25 games, the numbers aren't much better. So it's not like the numbers are deflated because I'm cherry picking a sample here. Like, he's been pretty bad for about a month now.
He really has. And it's, you know, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, he can't be a guy in this lineup on a daily basis, and they need him right now, right? Because you don't really have a first baseman, so they need him in the lineup. But he can't be a guy who's in there on a daily basis just not giving you anything. And he here and there he gets that hit, right? You know, I mean, he's actually still pretty good with runners in scoring position. So that's like one thing that you can still kind of maybe little hang your hat on. But yeah, I mean, it's almost like beginning of the season, he was coming up to bat, and you were like, dude's going to come up and get a hit or get on base. Like, he's just that dialed in. Now he comes up, and it's like, yeah, this is probably going to be an out. Like, that's where we've gone with him, right? I mean, it's been such a 180, and quick. Like, it happened quick. And it's like you said, it's an extended time, but it was almost like it happened overnight that he went from being a guy you can trust to being a guy that you don't expect much out of.
Yeah, and I mean, to just give you a number here, over his last 30 games, he has a 611 OPS, and you're talking about a corner infielder. I mean, that's the other part of it too. You're not talking about, I mean, 611 OPS doesn't play anywhere, but he's your first baseman. You got to have more than that.
No doubt. Now, Thompson did say, and I'm curious as to what game he feels this is going to be the case, but he said he was going to get him at third base in this Colorado series. He said there was a game in the Colorado series where he felt like they wanted to get him a game at third base. I'm not sure who that's going to be against. I doubt it's tonight because it's a lefty on the mound in Gomber. So you're not going to give Cody Clemens a start at first base against a lefty.
You have Freeland on Sunday, so it's going to be Saturday night if that happens.
Against Feltner, but then what does that look like? Is that just taking Sosa out of the game, out of the lineup, and giving Clemens a start? Is that all that is? I mean, maybe. I guess that's it. But you know, I need to see more. And the thing of it is, it's like when you're in this kind of slump, maybe a day off for Alec Boehm might not be the worst thing in the world. You know, or give him a day at DH and, you know, out of the field kind of thing. And, you know, let's see if that helps at all. But yeah, he's struggling, man. And he doesn't look, you know, I don't like the body language. I don't like how he looks in the clubhouse after the games. He just looks annoyed with himself. It's something that it's tangible. It's tangible.
Because he has this great finish to last season. He comes out of the gates hot this season, and he's probably thinking to himself, like, I figured it out. I've turned the corner. I mean, the things that we were talking about on this show are probably things that he himself felt like, wow, like this guy might be a 320 hitter, or there may be that 25 home run potential in his bat. And he's probably thinking, like, I finally, after all of this turbulence, I've solved it. And now here we are for the last few weeks, and it's been the total opposite. And you know, he's a player. We saw this at the beginning of last year. He is a guy that wears those failures. Like, he's got to find a way. And I'm not saying that this is the only reason that he's struggling. Like, I'm not saying that he's mentally soft. I'm not saying that he's mentally weak or that he's just beating himself up and that's why he's not hitting. But there is a precedent here that would let you know that he's taking this very, very hard right now. And it probably is impacting his game.
100%. And we know from past experience that this is the kind of thing that happens with this guy, right? I mean, he's a guy who lets things weigh on him a little bit. I think it's a situation where he's probably going to need somebody, you know, some leadership to kind of come over to him and, you know, kind of get him right again. I think Schwarber was a guy last year. Hoskins was a guy. Obviously, Hoskins isn't there. right now. So, but these are guys that were really important to getting him refocused and again, and maybe that's what he needs. Maybe he needs a little bit of a pick me up from a teammate. To kind of get back on the road. Who knows? I mean, he just needs something to kind of get going back in the other direction. He needs to accidentally run into a home run or something. Like, I mean, it just needs to be something that just kind of goes his way and kind of gets the malaise out of him, because it's visible. It's really there. You could see it.
The other guy, and my father kind of, he's the one that was, you got to talk about this on your next show. We're sitting there watching. He goes, what the hell is going on with the second baseman? He's like, he's got nothing. And he's like, what he meant was like, not only is he not hitting, but like he just looks lethargic right now. I mean, he like kind of going through the motions. Another young player who I think is struggling, who is probably feeling that a little bit, gets off to a great start, probably also feels that he's turned the corner. And I mean, listen, Bryson Stott, his last 30 games, and we talked about this on Monday, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but when we were going over the leadoff spot in this lineup and talking about the imperfect solution of going back to Bryson Stott, I mean, not only is it an imperfect solution, but now you run his 30-game totals. His last 30 games, he has a 285 on base percentage. And that's your leadoff hitter right now. And when you watch him, like if I were just a scout, forget all like the advanced numbers, because I'll tell you what, I actually just looked as we were going back and forth here. I just looked at his Baseball Savant page, his StatCast page. And I'm stunned to learn that Bryson Stott's hitting 303 against fastballs this season. Because right now when I watch him, he looks like a guy that simply cannot turn on anything with mid-90s plus velocity. Like he just can't get there. And I know a lot of them are flares out to left field, but when I watch his game, like I don't think he's a 20 home run guy. I don't think he's an 17, 18 home run guy, but like there's got to be something. There's got to be some pull action in his game at some point, because a lot of those dinks and donks and flares out to left center that were dropping in April, they're not anymore. Like there's got to be something else there now.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've noticed is, one of the things that they really worked on with him in the offseason and in spring training was how to adjust to that high fastball, right? I mean, and we saw it early in the season. He was more on top of that pitch and really driving it like at the very beginning of the season, first week of the season, first 2 weeks of the season. Now he looks like he's behind it again and chasing it again, kind of falling into that same rut that he was in a season ago, and that's how pitchers were attacking him with those fastballs up. He needs to get back to whatever he was doing mechanically in spring training and the beginning of the year. I think has kind of left him, and he's got to get back to that so that those pitches up there in the zone he can lay off of, or if they're within his swing plane, he can hit it with more of a line drive. Once he gets back to that, I think you'll see an ability to get around a little bit better on some of these fastballs. Otherwise, I think he's guessing a little bit. I think he's going up there kind of being a guess hitter. And that's why they love the fact that he fouls off a lot of pitches, right? Well, that's good. That works a pitcher, that gets you into the bullpen faster. That's always a good thing. But I also think that a lot of those pitches are pitches he could probably drive if he wasn't up there just trying to guess at what's coming next, or just trying to spoil, a pitch to get one that he wants in a certain spot, which maybe he's not going to get. And it's, the other teams know where his happy zone is. They're not going to put a ball there intentionally anyway. So maybe stop trying to do something like that and just go after a pitch, man. I'd rather see you strike out. And listen to me, who doesn't like strikeouts, but I'd rather see you swing and miss at a pitch with a little bit more aggression, right, with 2 strikes, than constantly hacking away and just fouling them off, and then maybe hit that flare single, or you're going to pop up, or whatever you end up doing, just to kind of get going again. I'm not saying on a regular basis. I'm cool with the foul balls. I really am. I just think that he is so stuck in that right now. Right. That it's preventing him from driving the ball. I just want to see him a couple of swings, be aggressive, make good contact. Then you can go back to this again a little bit, and find that happy medium. So that's what I need to see out of Bryson Stott.
Yeah, and in fairness, listen, we're going week to week here. We do a show twice a week. We take what we're most recently have watched.
Yeah.
like we said, when things were going well, we're like, do I expect this to continue for 160 games? No, I don't. Do I expect Bryson Stott to hit a $185 for the next 2 months? I don't. So we understand here, obviously, that there's an ebb and flow to this entire thing, but there are some trends that you kind of just look at, and it's hard not to be a little bit concerned. And like I said, sitting there Wednesday watching the game, and you appreciate how Gaussman threw the ball. He was awesome.
Yeah.
And Wheeler almost matched him pitch for pitch. Broken bats. They must have went through 14 broken bats in that game on Wednesday. But it is hard as you watch this Phillies lineup right now. You kind of just feel like, and I know they scored a little bit on Sunday, they scored a little bit on Tuesday night, but when you go through and you just player by player and you're looking at this thing, you're like, man, there's so many guys all at once that are struggling. But I think the good news is, if you're a Phillies fan, you're looking at this and saying, like, how much longer is Kyle Schwarber going to hit 180? Like that hot streak that everybody's been sitting on, like it's got to probably be coming, right?
Yeah, a couple weeks. It'll be June.
Yeah, until June. And I mean, it sounds so stupid, but like, I don't think that Kyle Schwarber is a 183, 185 hitter. Now, that being said, I don't know where you're at on this. And I mean, I don't think this is exactly breaking news, but it's clear as day that and it sounds like excuse making, but it's clear as day that he is being impacted by some type of lower body issue. Like there's just no doubt about it. All you have to do is see him jog out to left field to know. Like this doesn't take an advanced eye to figure this out. Like there's something going on there. Now, obviously he's healthy enough to play through it, but I think it's the Phillies. Like I almost feel like just acknowledge it. Just be like, hey, I have my knees swollen. I have an ankle issue, or my hamstring's been tight. Like, why not just say it? Like, I'm good enough to play through, but it's impacted me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they don't say it. I'll be curious to see now. The Phillies have won 3 straight since they made the lineup switch, right, and put Stott back at the top and Schwarber in the middle. Does Stott stay in the leadoff spot against Gomber, being it's lefty?
I guess the question becomes like, what's the alternative? And I don't want to do this again. We did this on Monday. Is it Turner with his 10-game hitting streak?
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, I just, he's again with Stott struggling as much as he's struggling, and he does have a tendency, Rob Thompson, to, sit Stott or sit Marsh or maybe even both against a left-handed pitcher. So the question becomes, what does he do with a lineup against a lefty? Gomber's not a tough lefty.
Well, I will say, like, you look at the ERA and you go, okay, 6.75, and like he's not a prospect. He's 29 years old. He's been around for a little bit. I agree. He's not a tough lefty, but in his last 3 starts, he's thrown 17 total innings, 3 earned runs allowed. He had a train wreck dumpster fire, just god awful start to the season. His last 3 times through, he's been pretty good. So he is riding a little bit of momentum coming into this start tonight. I agree. I actually think that, hey, let's see a Josh Harrison here tonight. It might be time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see him. I think you might see Dalton Guthrie in the lineup again tonight. The question is, how does he construct it? Like, does he go back to Schwarber in the leadoff spot again? I don't know. I mean, it's curious. I'm curious. It would be interesting to maybe put one of those guys just for a game up there. Not to say that it's something you're going to do long term, but hey, if you're not confident in Stott against this left-hander, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to juggle everything back up. Just plug and play, right?
Well, so that actually is an interesting question, and I think, or a different way to look at it. And we haven't talked about this. Are you okay in the absence of a solid leadoff option until one of these guys gets hot, until it kind of clicks and makes sense, where you say, this is what they should do? Because all of these different parts and all these different options are struggling, are you more of the mindset? Because I know traditionally, going back to when we used to do the show and Gabe Kapler was the manager, you hated the constant night after night jumbling of the lineup. And players don't like it too. The vast majority of players, they want the consistency. But we know it here. Trey Turner's not a great option in the leadoff spot right now. Bryson Stott, for obvious reasons that we've talked about. Kyle Schwarber's god awful. Bryce Harper doesn't want to do it. Alec Boehm isn't that guy right now. So that. Do you take it game by game and keep these inconsistent lineups and just kind of roll it day to day, or what do you do here?
I'm more, like you said, I believe in trying to have some level of consistency, but I'm cool with having different lineups versus a left-handed pitcher and a right-handed pitcher. Like if you need to maximize guys' ability to hit lefties, right? Then do so. In that vein, go right ahead. But as long as it's like a consistent thing and not something that's constantly changing. That's where I get a little annoyed when it's for no reason, almost constantly changing. I believe in letting guys hit through their struggles. I'm on board with Rob Thompson with that. I don't necessarily feel that they need to hit through lengthy struggles in the same spot. If it becomes, like where Schwarber was, it got to a point where it's like, all right, man, he can hit through this, but he can't do it out of the leadoff spot. So yeah, I mean, I'm cool with that. I just don't want it to be every game you come in and you have no idea who's going to be where. Like that drives me crazy. And I think it drives the players. You're right. It drives the players crazy too. So, but I'm cool if they have a different lineup versus lefties against versus righties, and you have a different person in the leadoff spot just because it's a left-handed pitcher. I'm fine with that.
A lot of negativity here. A lot of negativity.
It's weird because they're they stabilized, right? I mean, it's kind of, but you have to identify what the issue is. I mean, we talked about the starting pitching. It was great. Yeah. It was great, right? I mean, that's the reason they've won 3 in a row more than anything else. I mean, yeah, like you said, they hit Sunday and they hit Tuesday, but it was the starting pitching was the real reason that the Phillies have won 3 straight games. Right. But the lineup needs more consistency because you're not going to get great starts like that night in, night out. If you do, then you're in great shape.
Let me just shine a little bit of a positive light on things here. A player that we have swooned over on this show all season has been Nick Castellanos.
MVP,
right?
Baby. Gold
That's
glove.
our guy. Like we are the official podcast of Nick Castellanos. I feel validated by this selfishly because when they signed him, I was like, this is the guy. And the things that I said at the time, because I sounded like a moron for 162 games last year. But the things that I said at the time was like, yeah, listen, I like Kyle Schwarber. Like there could be some leadoff on base skills there if they want to go that direction. He can run into 30, 40 home runs. That's great. I'm all about it. But the guy that I want is Nick Castellanos because he's a doubles machine. He's an extra base hit machine. And he plays with some fire. Like that's what that was my big thing. I was like, he's a dog, man. Like he's a guy that when like he scores, he comes back to the dugout. He's pumping the chest. The flap is open. He's got some juice to him. And he was a dial tone last season. Like just a total dial tone, and he was unproductive. And I'm sure that those things were, intertwined together. But here we are this year, and he is all of those things. Like it is the Nick Castellanos that I have admired from afar. Like going back to 2019, I had a tweet. I actually retweeted it a couple weeks ago. I was like, the one player that can make a difference for this lineup at the deadline is Nick Castellanos. Like this has been a multi-year admiration for me. And, not only does he get off to the hot start, but you're like, well, you figure he's probably going to come back to earth at some point. And he still probably will come back to earth a little bit. But you look at what he's done over the last 2 weeks. His last 15 games, 339, 909 OPS, 3 homers. He's in the middle of everything. He's been playing outstanding defense at times. Like he made a great play on Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. And he's running off the field for the third out, and the fans are going fucking crazy in right field, like down the first baseline, giving it to him, man. Like there is a different energy, just an absolute like electricity coming from this guy right now. And it has been awesome to watch. And I'm really happy for the guy on a personal level.
Yeah, I am too. I've always been a fan of Castellanos. I kind of felt like there were times last year where I was defending him, and I felt bad doing so because he was really not good. And he was like, hey, he had that little bit of a wrist injury. Then he had he started to hit again, and then he had the oblique injury, and that kind of like zapped him completely at the end. And like I kind of like was making excuses, but you're right. It's a different personality. It's that FU personality that he has.
I went for it today. I don't know.
No, it's a fuck you personality. It is. I mean, no, really, it's there, and it's cool, and it's like you see it. You see him having fun, and then even stuff like what he's been able to do. Like the Phillies are so good about letting him have his son hang out with him. His son Liam's out in the outfield shagging flies during outfield practice. And then, after the game, he's right behind the plate and he's celebrating with his dad. I don't know if you saw the photo that they got. It was awesome. I mean, so that kind of stuff, like keeping Nick happy and keeping him in that kind of frame of mind is what makes him such a good player. And the Phillies are going to be lucky to have this guy for the next few years. They really are, especially if he has this approach and this mentality. He's locked in, and he's been their best player, hands down, this season. And the defense is the thing. And I asked Topper about it after the game. I'm like, well, all we talked about all season so far is the work he's done with Kevin Long. But really, we should be talking a little bit about the work he's done with Paco Figueroa, because I'm not turning him. I mean, I joke that he's a Gold Glover, but he really has had. I think he's had one play where I went, yeah, he kind of
He really hurt them in that Dodgers finale.
That game against the Dodgers.
He turned a single into a triple. It really impacted the game. That was tough. But other than that, I mean, he's made some. And listen, you could talk about range. Like I would be willing to admit that better jumps and better range, maybe some of the balls that he gets to that look difficult. A Gold Glove outfielder coast. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. I'm just telling you that there have been plenty of plays this season where you go, it's a pretty damn nice play from a guy that you're not expecting that from.
Exactly. Especially for a guy who that they, when they brought him in, the whole plan was to kind of alternate him as a designated hitter because they didn't think he could play defense. And now he's being forced to play every game. And it's like, yeah, he's good out there. He's fine. He's not hurting us. So that's certainly a huge positive.
And this is, I guess, where I kind of come back to is like we pick apart the lineup and we note all of the struggles. I think my main takeaway, though, is, and it still just comes back to the starting pitching. Can you get the starting pitching stabilized? Because I think that Bryson Stott and Alec Boehm are better than this. I believe that Nick Castellanos is this guy. I know what Bryce Harper is. Kyle Schwarber, I will tell you, like, this was the first week where I kind of was like, are we going to get the right version of him this season? And like, I'm not writing that off. We're only a quarter of the way through, but I do have some concerns there. But even if you don't, and he still runs into 35, 40 home runs, he can be a useful player for you. I think that there is a world, though, where they add to this lineup. And if Kyle Schwarber cannot increase, we'll say, like the bat to ball skills, and like if he can't get the on base percentage like up to 320, 330, like there's a world where I think he becomes like a 6 hitter in this lineup, maybe even 7th. I don't think we're there yet, but like he's got to get a little bit, like he's got to turn it on a little bit. So I think they can survive that, much the way that they survived Nick Castellanos' struggles last year.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's dependent on him going off, but I look at this lineup and I just think, okay, like I know that there are parts that are good. I know that there are parts that are struggling, and throw Trey Turner into that mix as well. I have to assume that there's more there. And I don't think you're ever going to see this lineup have 8, 9 guys click all at once. Like, it's just not how baseball works. But over the course of the final, 120 plus games here, I think that there's enough there that offensively, I've said it all along, I would be surprised if the Phillies don't finish the season as a top 12 scoring offense. I still would be surprised by that.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I do think you're right also to say that they're going to add to it. I think that will come once Harper can play first base. And I think Harper playing first base, you're probably still about a month to 6 weeks out from that. So you got to kind of get.
I just don't think that you're going to see that until after the All-Star break. I don't. I know that I get why there's urgency to do it. I mean, getting Kyle Schwarber out of left field would vastly improve the defensive alignment and probably have a positive impact on his offense. If I'm speculating that there's an injury correlation in play here, I hear you. But I know that he said it publicly the other day, and then I think it was to one of the beats, he said something along the lines of like, we know that I don't have to be on the field defensively this year. And like that kind of set off like a little bit of like an alarm where I was like, that's an interesting thing to say.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. I am curious. Like, I think I'm with you. Like, I think he ends up playing first base for this team this season, but I'm not absolutely 100% sold on that.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, that was my initial reaction when I first saw him taking grounders there. I'm like, I'm not convinced this is what they want to do, but I do think that it creates flexibility. I'm not saying he's going to play first base all the time. I'm not saying he's going to be the regular first baseman, but the ability to do so, to allow you to move the DH around that lineup and get guys off their feet, will help a Schwarber, will help even help Castellanos, even though he's playing really well in left field. Will help Alec Boehm. I know they don't really do it with the catcher, but maybe once or twice, in the second half of the season, you get JT Realmuto in just a DH spot and not catching a game or something. Who knows?
Are you a little surprised? I sometimes I look at the lineup and they're missing a piece, and it's because Rhys Hoskins. I mean, Rhys Hoskins is the whole impetus of this entire thing. But sometimes I wonder, wouldn't it make sense to? Garrett Stubbs gave them more offensively than they could have reasonably expected last year, and I'm not pining to have Garrett Stubbs play twice a week. But I am a little bit surprised that they haven't trotted out a Stubbs-Realmuto combination.
Me too.
To get Boehm or Sosa off their feet a day or two. I'm not advocating for JT Realmuto to play first base even once a week, but occasionally, just occasionally mix that in.
I agree. And it's not just for, even let's say you wanted to give Turner a day. You could slide Sosa to short, put Boehm at third and JT at first. Something along those lines. You could, there's a lot of things you can do in that regard. I am a little surprised that they keep trotting the same guys out. They're not, I'm a little surprised Josh Harrison hasn't had a bigger opportunity, or Garrett Stubbs hasn't had a bigger opportunity. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I just think that they're going to try and find something else, probably another outfielder in my mind. Or a first baseman, obviously, but I think I ultimately wouldn't be surprised if they went and try and got an outfielder if Harper can play first base down the line, and then you can kind of have Schwarber as your primary designated hitter. I think that's something that is a legitimate thing that could be happening before the July 31 trade deadline.
I want to mention a player here that has sort of gotten lost in the Lehigh shuffle, but Jake Cave, since he's gone down to AAA, has made the most of that opportunity, and to the point where I think he's almost worth mentioning. We don't typically dive into what's happening in the sub levels here, but I would just point out that he's hitting in, I think it's been 8 or 9 games now, 35 at bats. He's hitting 457. With a 1.313 OPS, and he's hit safely in every game that he's played with the Iron Pigs. And he also has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's played 9 games with them, 8 games with them. 6 of them have been multi-hit games. He's tearing the cover off the baseball. And I'm not saying that he's a solution, but I do think when you look at this team's lack of depth, they're struggling to score runs. I do think that Jake Cave is just within arm's reach here of being back on this roster.
Yeah, ultimately, the decision that was made, and we talked about this briefly, it wasn't that when they sent him down that he was the worst player in the lineup or on the worst hitter on the roster. It was they needed somebody else who can play first base besides Boehm, and that's why they kept Cody Clemens. Jake Cave brings a lot more to the table than Cody Clemens both as a hitter and as a defender. It was just that they felt that not having someone else who can play first base was detrimental. But now you look at it and say, do we need to find a way to get, I think once Harper's able to play first base, that Jake Cave is back on this roster. I think and I think they told him that. I think that they wanted him to understand that this was not a performance issue. Just go down there, keep hitting, keep working. We'll get you back up here, because it just was a structural lineup structural situation, and that's why he got sent down.
Now, we're recording this early Friday morning, and Anthony has a big press conference down at, is that at the Wells Fargo Center?
On the floor of the Wells Fargo Center.
That's the dawning of a new era of Flyers hockey. And Anthony had a good story sort of defending, because I know there were some eye rolls when they hired Keith Jones. Yeah. Anthony had a good story. I don't want to say a defense of Keith Jones, but at least hey, let's pump the brakes and give this a shot. There's a good reason for it.
Right.
But I digress. We're going to keep the show a little bit tighter, but I do want to hit on at least 2 more things.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 before we get out of here. So we'll probably end up rounding near an hour before it's all said and done. let me start here, and we'll get to Jose Alvarado because that's a big story. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's first start here with something that we talked about extensively on Monday. Bailey Falter. Bailey Falter, if the Phillies' probable pitchers, which they posted on their site, if this is true, and I think it is, Bailey Falter is going to start Monday night against the San Francisco Giants in the opener of that 3-game set. Yep. Is this Bailey Falter's last shot? Is this it? Because one thing I do want to correct, we had said they could go to Nick Nelson this week. They couldn't. They had to wait 15. When they took him off the injured list and activated him, he had to wait 15 days.
Yeah, I forgot about that rule that once you come off the injured list and you get optioned, you can't be recalled for 2 weeks. Yeah.
So if Falter throws on Monday night,
he
would then his turn in the rotation would come through again the following weekend at home against the Cubs. Is Bailey Falter pitching on Monday night for his job?
I think so. I the argument that Thompson made was they want to just give him a little bit extra rest to see if they can get his velocity up a little bit, because they feel like that's part of the problem, that right now he's just not throwing, he's not missing bats, and that he's a better pitcher when he can. So we'll see. But the Giants are not a great lineup. Maybe that's part of it.
Anthony, the Giants suck. They are so bad.
They are bad.
We have a 6-week-old at home.
Yeah.
There's been some late night TV.
You've watched some of those games?
I've watched my boy Gabe. That team stinks, and they've actually run into some pretty important injury issues here lately as well. And they're poised. That is a team. The Phillies are embarking on a 6-game road trip in 2 difficult venues where they don't particularly play that well historically, but this is an opportunity over the next 6 games to win a road trip.
Yeah. I think 4-2 is a must. I think 5-1 is a real possibility with who they're playing. I'm just saying. 4-2 to me. 4-2 is a must.
You better get 2 good starts out of Taijuan Walker and win your Nolan Wheeler starts. If
you can't be to me. You can't be 3-3 on this trip. It's not good enough. I'm just being honest.
At some point, mediocrity can't be good enough. We can't you can't. And we're not at Memorial Day yet. Theoretically, if the Phillies go 3-3 on this trip, we can talk them, next week and say, okay, they're staying afloat. I know they don't have to make their move right now, but come on, these fans. I will say this. I tweeted this, and I think it was one of these tweets. I probably should have done it during the game, but I waited till the next morning. That crowd. Here's a take. That Phillies crowd on Wednesday was I believe the 3rd smallest of the season. It was 31,000 plus.
Yeah.
That crowd was awesome on Wednesday. Yeah. They were engaged. They were into it. When there was some noise in the late innings, that would have been a top 5 non-opening day weekend, non-fireworks regular season crowd last season. How about that?
It would have.
5 best crowds the Phillies had last year that weren't centered around fireworks or opening day, and certainly any Mets fan infiltration that automatically gets removed. That crowd has delivered, and they've shown up for this team now for 2 months based on what happened last year. This team needs to move now and give these fans a reason to believe about what they're watching in 2023. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I agree. So, but your original question, I went down a rabbit hole there about Bailey Falter. Yeah, this is it. I think if he has a bad outing Monday, I think that's it for him. And I think that they go to the minors, whether it's Nick Nelson, whether it's Christopher Sanchez, whoever. I think that a change is made in the rotation in that number 5 spot. But yeah, he has to have a good start against the Giants come Monday. He really does. Otherwise, he's going to be sent back down. And he has an option left. It's not like they're going to DFA him or anything, right?
It's not the end of Bailey Falter's career, but it would be the end of him in the starting rotation for at least the near term.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my other question here that I think we have to address is Jose Alvarado. And anytime you hear, I think it started, he's playing catch on Tuesday, and there was some, I guess, what's the word, discomfort in the wrist area, and then it turned into an elbow issue, some inflammation. They get it looked at. Rob Thompson tells you guys after the game on Wednesday that they're encouraged by what the doctor saw, nothing structural. but they'll shut it down for a few days and then kind of reassess, get him throwing. But he's on the shelf for 15 days, no matter how this shakes out. I guess there's two ways to look at it, just based on the very limited information that we have about the injury. How concerned are you about the injury itself? And then the second question I'll throw to you is, how equipped are the Phillies to handle the loss of Jose Alvarado, who has arguably been one of the 2 or 3 best relievers in baseball through the first quarter of the season?
Yeah, I mean, concern level, I'm not as concerned, and I say it from this perspective. And again, this is just having been around coaches and athletes for a long, long time. So we get in there and talk to Thompson. It was interesting that it was such a beautiful day, and they had us gather in his office on Wednesday afternoon. And the question was asked him about Alvarado, and he said, yeah, of course he's concerned.
Yeah.
Then after the game, he wasn't even asked. And he said, we got really good news on Alvarado. And it's like, okay, he brought it up without us even asking. It must not be that bad. Right. If it was something that they were really concerned about,
come get that information. You're gonna have
to
pry that out of my
right? You're gonna have to ask for it, right? So the fact that he says, mild inflammation, and then you talk to Alvarado after the game, and it's funny because they had Diego there to translate, but Alvarado can speak. He's pretty good with his English. And so Diego's only kind of like translating the questions, and Alvarado's answering in English. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to be shut down for a couple days, and then I'm going to start throwing again. And it's like, well, okay. So if it's just kind of like let something kind of quiet itself down and then get back into your throwing program and then get them back as soon as the IL stint is over, then I'm not as concerned. As far as are they equipped, I think they are. And I think they are because we've seen good Gregory Soto, so he kind of bumps into that late inning lefty role. Matt Strom continues to be great. I mean, we talked about him on Monday, right? And so I think he kind of bumps into that middle to late inning Soto role as the lefty there.
God forbid you just have everything you want, right? Like, God forbid there was a world where you had good Soto, new weapon in Strom, a hell of a toy, multi-inning toy, and then Alvarado. But you can't. This team can never have it all, right?
Yeah. But I'll say this: the one other thing to add in is Craig Kimbrell. Man, did he look good in the last 2 outings after he imploded against the Dodgers, and we were like, uh-oh, this is Corey Knebel all over again. Right. And his last 2 outings were great. He was throwing 99, and he went on back-to-back days. Yeah. That's saying something.
So he was juiced up on Tuesday night, and you're kind of like looking at the gun, and you're wondering like, what are we doing here? And even when Gausman came out with some of his velo numbers on Wednesday, I'm like, what's going on here this week? But Kimbrell gets into the game on Wednesday, and I'm glad you brought him up because we're sitting behind the plate. I have enough of a trained eye. I think I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And Kimbrell's sitting mostly like 95, 96 on Wednesday afternoon, but everything was down in the zone, had life late to the plate. Like, I was very impressed with how Craig Kimbrell threw the ball on a back-to-back. I have no idea what the hell to make of him right now. Like, he was horrible. He was great for 2 weeks. He was horrible in LA. And then he comes out against the Blue Jays, good lineup, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to tell you that Craig Kimbrell's like, hey, he's in the game. It's over. Like, shut down, lockdown. But he's like showing enough where I'm like, this guy is going to contribute.
The stuff's still there.
The
stuff's still there. That's important, right? I mean, so you see it, and you see him throwing hard. You see him having late life. You see he's throwing his breaking ball for strikes, which is important because if he's not throwing it for strikes, then he's a one-pitch pitcher, and then he's Max Muncy's hitting grand slams off him. So yeah, I mean, it's important. Dominguez is the one guy for me that I'm not certain where he's at. Like, I'm a little disappointed with what he's provided so far. He's had some good outings, but he's had some inconsistency. He got confused on the one play. I think Bohm kind of surprised. So afterwards, in the moment, I was like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
And afterwards, it was, he saw Bohm turn to second, And when he turned, he decided to look down at the base to make sure that he got his foot on the base, and didn't realize Bohm was throwing him the ball, and that's what happened there.
Sure,
right?
I mean that's what happened, but like you've got to have the wherewithal to know that the first baseman may pivot his feet back on a flip. Like that's what he's looking at. He sees Bohm turn and the hips go towards first, and he thinks, okay, I need to set my feet and receive the throw back on the double play. But like you cannot drop your eyes off the first baseman there. But that being said, like he threw the ball, I thought he was okay on Wednesday. I thought he was a little bit more aggressive in the zone as well.
Yeah.
But he has not been, he, like, for me, like the assessment there is if you presented Sir Anthony Dominguez to me for the first time this season, I'd say like, okay, like he's a guy that I'll go to in the 6th or maybe the 7th, and I'm okay with it. I'm not looking at him though as this like lights out, slam the door shut, high leverage guy. Like he hasn't been that guy to this point. And certainly that's in there. We've seen it from him. We've seen it from him for multiple stretches throughout his still relatively young career. But you're right, has not quite been himself, so far.
Yeah, that's the one guy where I'm like, man, if he could just get back to being himself, then I'm really confident in the bullpen, because I do like, and look, Brogdon's pitched really well, right? Other than when he pitches on back-to-back days, that's when he gave up a couple runs. But other than that, I think that he's been a really good piece in the bullpen, and he's kind of been pushed. I mean, he pitched, what was it, the 8th inning on Tuesday when we first found out that Alvarado's got a thing. They put him into that setup role and went with Kimbrel to close it out. So it's really kind of interesting to me, right? I mean, where the bullpen is, and it's nice that they have the depth to deal with an injury like this for a couple of weeks, and that's encouraging to me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that kind of clears us out through all the Phillies talk. Do you have a one last thing here?
I do, and it will tie back into something we were talking about with the Phillies. So we talked about Alec Bohm and his struggles, and then I say, well, I'm a proponent of guys letting guys hit through, their struggles and things like that. Interesting story out of Detroit. The Tigers president, Scott Harris, was interviewed, I guess prior to yesterday's game, and they're talking about, the Tigers are 17-19, right? And they've kind of been really good of late. Really have only struggled against teams in the AL East, but otherwise have been a pretty good team. They've been over 500 against the rest of baseball. And he was talking to reporters, and he credited like the Tigers' turnaround, this season, over the last couple of weeks or few weeks, to the fact that AJ Hinch, their manager, pulled Javi Baez from a game in mid-April for losing track of the number of outs there were, and ended up running into a double play. It was a base running mistake that he made. Pulled him and benched him. And it kind of like and Harris was saying that kind of, the way that happened, and then the way Baez kind of responded to it, which was a positive response, kind of made a young team or kind of realize, hey, accountability is important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they've played really good baseball ever since. And so I guess the question becomes, is it possible that maybe if you take a guy out of the lineup, it might not have to be for a dumb play like running into a double play by Javi Baez, but if you take a guy out of the lineup for a game or two, and kind of, it's like I'm almost sending a message, does that work? And does the whole team respond to that? Or is that something where you sit there and say they're going to respond negatively and they won't like it as much? And it's one of those decisions and discussions that you always wonder, is it knowing your team, knowing your group before you make that call, or is it a situation where, like, hey, if we hold one player accountable, we hold all players accountable, and everybody responds? So I'm just curious to see, is that something you would think to do if a guy continues to struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes down to, like, are you talking about just if a player struggles, or if you're talking about a player doing something like egregiously?
Well, I know it's I mean, look, the Detroit situation isn't exactly a direct correlation to the Phillies, right? I mean, it's certainly not. Although the Phillies have run into more outs on the bases than I think any team in baseball this year. That being said, I guess it's a twofold approach, right? I mean, you could say is it something based on boneheaded play, or is it something based on the fact that you're just not finding your way, even you're not hitting your way out of your struggles? Like, I mean, I guess you can look at it from two different perspectives.
I think what it really comes down to is how does the team. You have to know the personality of your team. I think you also have to know the way that the majority of the team feels about the player. And in the case of like, if you have a player where you know that privately they're like, man, he's a hell of a player and we need him to win, but like, what a dog, like in a negative way, or like I just wish that like someone would kick his ass into gear, because you know the players do that from afar. Like privately, they might not talk about it amongst themselves and in certain corners of the clubhouse, but they just feel like, man, like we just got to get a little bit more out of this guy. So you have that situation, and I think that you appreciate the manager for acknowledging it and acting on it. But if you have a guy that you know is just 100 miles an hour all the time, and he does something stupid on the bases, or he doesn't run out one ball, but you know that he's a grinder and that he's all in, and that you go to war with that guy, and then he gets singled out for something like that, I think it can have a negative impact on like the psyche. Because I think as a player, like, like when a manager does something from afar, you say like, he had to do that. Or you say like, man, that's bullshit. Like he just singled him out, like, and you turn the other way. When it comes to performance, like I think it's probably the same way. Like I think there's certain players that obviously you give like a longer leash to, and you say like, if a player wants to work his way out of it, like a Trey Turner says, I want to play every day, I don't want to sit down. But I do think it gets to a point where if you start to talk about like a multi-month run where, like you might say like, listen, this is why I'm doing this. I know you don't want that to happen. We got to do it for the good of the team. And I think the players ultimately will respect that. So it's a fine line, and every situation is unique. But the way that I look at it, especially if you have a young team, like an impressionable team, I do think it matters a little bit more.
Right.
When you look at this Phillies roster, like I don't know who that player is that you're like, yeah, they better send a message to player A or player X, because like the Phillies, like that's going to shake up this clubhouse. Like the Phillies are like a little bit of a different dynamic, I think.
I think you're right on that. I think you're absolutely right on that. There's not a player that you can sit there and say, we need to make an example of this guy, and kind of shake up the room. Like I don't see that with this roster.
And it turns quick, because like the 2018, the 2019, the 2020 Phillies, like the 2019 Phillies, like for me was like the all-timer, where I was like, this is the most, I just felt that clubhouse was so incredibly entitled. The way that they walked around, the way that they talked, like that, like as if they had arrived, and they hadn't won anything. They had never won. There were a lot of guys that had underachieved, and that team was begging for some accountability, and there was none. And I know that they weren't successful in 20 and 21, but I felt that it was going in the right direction at least.
Yeah.
The 2019 Phillies, like, man, that was the team. That just needed a kick in the ass, like any team had ever needed a kick in the ass.
Yeah, and I think that my final thought on it is, and you mentioned this at the very beginning of the show, so this is kind of like a full circle, is that this team, whenever they seem to face adversity, figures it out and finds their way, and they're able to stabilize. And so when you have that as a gift, as a trait, right? That's something that makes it a little bit easier, because they're holding themselves accountable in those situations. So you don't feel like you need to make an example or do something to try and wake up the room, so to speak, because they do it for themselves. If it got to a point where they couldn't do that, where they couldn't get out of the problem, the malaise that they're in, then maybe you do something. But this team has always shown, or at least in the last year and this year, has shown an ability to do that, and that's probably why you don't.
There's another team in this city that could probably use some of that before Sunday night. And isn't it amazing, like just based on what you're talking about, listening to what you just said, now thinking about, what happened after that game last night. And I hear James Harden talking about no player has more foul calls missed against them than me.
Yeah.
It's a fact. You can look it up. He's complaining in the fourth quarter down the stretch. What a ghost must have tripped him, and he wanted a foul. Embiid talking about like, I didn't get the ball enough. Like, dude, like the Phillies are. they won 3 straight games, and we just criticized the hell out of them on this show at different points.
Yeah.
So the Phillies are not exempt from criticism. But like you talk about what we saw from that Phillies team last year and like the toughness and ability to respond versus what I see and have heard from the Sixers the last number of years, night and day.
Night and day.
And maybe the Sixers figure it out before Sunday night, but
I still think they will.
This year's different, huh?
I still think they will. I said I told everybody in our Slack chat, I said Sixers in 7. Now, I didn't think that they would win 2 games in Boston prior to Game 7. I'll be honest. I didn't look at it and say, oh, they're going to win 3 games in Boston. But I did say Sixers in 7, and I'm going to stick with my prediction. Just like I stuck with my prediction that the Mets would fall apart. And here they are again, behind the Phillies in the standings now. They're now.
Yeah, as we record this show, the Phillies are ahead of the Mets and could be in second place with a Marlins loss and a Phillies win tonight.
Yes, yeah. So things looking up and things looking down for New York, which is always a beautiful thing. Yankees in last place.
People are like, when you look at the Mets, like people are starting to talk like trading off pieces at the deadline. Like
they're too old. Go ahead.
Take a look at their month of June, too. Like, the schedule is relentless for them in June. And you start to look at it, and you're like, man, like, they might be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
A lot of trouble.
Love it. Love it.
You hate to say it. All right, well, for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow the show at UpPhillies. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at AntSanPhilly.
Oh, that's not that one. Go ahead. I put the wrong thing on the bottom. Go ahead.
And you can follow me on Twitter at BobWankelCB. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to shows online. Be sure to check us out there. We will be back on Monday, and we will talk to you soon.